have the pleasure to welcome Jeffrey Racemani of Forrester. Jeffrey, senior analyst at Forrester with over 25 years of experience, and he helps tech executives to develop sustainable sourcing and sourcing strategies and improve supplier relationship. His speech or what he's talking about, I think that's an elementary piece what we really want to talk about. GenAI for procurement, and this next sentence, leverage this pivotal moment or risk falling behind. And I would think the last one, risk falling behind, is a bit what's driving. What do we really need to do today? Where are we maybe too fast, or where are we too slow? Where do we risk to miss something? So, Jeffrey, welcome on stage.
Thank you.
Jeffrey, over to you.
Thank you so much. Buenos días. ¿Cómo estás? That's probably 60% of what I know in Spanish. The rest is coming soon. What a beautiful evening Zycus put together last evening. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Waking up this morning, hats off to Zycus. Waking up this morning, I just went out. I wanted to breathe the fresh air in Mallorca because yesterday I was just very busy getting in from the airport straight into the hotel and then evening icebreaker. Beautiful morning, almost clear blue skies. But today I'm not going to talk about the weather. 2000, December 2000 to be precise, Daily Mail put in an article which said the internet may be a passing fad because millions have given up on it. So millions of people really turned their back on internet those days for two reasons. Why? One is it was causing a lot of frustrations because of its limitations those days. Second, internet, the World Wide Web, was expensive. It was coming with charges, humongous charges to the people, and they said, let's turn our back to it. Fast forward 25 years later, today, what does Daily Mail say? While there's certainly hype around generative AI, and the markets will have its ups and downs, we don't think it's a passing fad. Change of events, 2000, 2024. What did they say about internet? And what are they saying about GenAI? GenAI, AI has truly arrived. Just a few weeks ago, not many people paid so much of attention. The Nobel Prizes were announced. It just happens, I think, in September, last week of September, first week of October, all the categories are announced. Two things stood out. One, physics. The other one was chemistry. The Nobel Prize winners this year for physics and chemistry had something to do with AI and GenAI. Physics, it was Jeffrey Hinton and Jonathan, I forgot his last name. He knew it. The people who know much better than me here. They actually used AI to analyze neural networks, generic neural networks. They got the prize for that. Chemistry, it was all about protein segregation and research on that. Again, another Jonathan and a lady received the prize. So GenAI has truly arrived, in my opinion. If you look at the procurement function, procurement is a beautiful function. It's sandwiched between the internal and the external ecosystem of companies. It has not been given its due respect and importance all these years, I think. But today, when I look at the procurement function, there are 4 trends that are transcending and pivoting the procurement function. I put in here catapulting the procurement function because I was speaking to a lot of procurement end-user organizations like you. I speak to vendors who cater to the procurement function. One thing is clear. Procurement is tasked to do more with less. Talk to any procurement person, they are understaffed. But they are tasked to do more. They need to do much more than what they were doing, and that too strategic. So we see 4 trends. So firstly is ESG. Sustainability is no longer a one-liner statement from the CEO or the CFO in the earnings call. ESG is inbuilt, is permeated, invaded, use whatever you want, but it's part of procurement to take the baton on ESG and run with organizations. Just a few weeks ago, I was reading saying Air New Zealand has given up on its net zero targets. I think they had 2030 as the net zero targets. And guess what? They said 2 reasons. We're going to move our targets. They haven't said when. They are not getting better aircrafts, that's one. And second is they're not getting sustainable air fuels, which they originally envisaged. And who is now running with that? The targets have not been announced, the revised targets, but procurement is now tasked to say, how do you get SAFs, sustainable air fuels? Is it available? How do you procure it, source it sensibly in a secure manner? A confectionery giant, Mars, they had they use palm oil for their products, obviously, and palm oil came in from Ukraine. Ukraine went into war with Russia. That source was affected. They had to source palm oil from the rainforests in Malaysia. In Malaysia, there was child labor in those forests. Mars got to know it. They said, no, we need to look at alternatives. But the war started in Ukraine, so they went back to Malaysia. This time they did vendor consolidation. They started putting a lot more procurement. They started putting a lot more conditions on the suppliers of palm oil because you need to clear rainforests, which is actually environmentally destructive to get in there. Procurement was at the helm of affairs. So procurement has got a very catapulting road here. Second, innovation, cost base. When you talk about procurement, more often than not, people think it's all on cost. They try and cut down costs. But today, procurement is tasked to do more on innovation. How? They have the best connections to the suppliers. Today, suppliers are invited into the R&D labs of companies. So you take the best automotives in the world, German cars, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Porsche, Volkswagen. All these companies that I mentioned getting the suppliers into the R&D labs in the conceptualization phase of their cars. It could be a new airbag. It could be a part for their EVs or whatever. But suppliers are no longer coming later and saying, okay, do to this design, but they are part of the conceptualization phase. Thirdly, resilience. I don't have to talk about it, you all know. Supply chain came to a grinding halt during the pandemic. And this was not the first time, it has happened in the past as well. But this was much more glaring because it brought the entire supply chain to a halt. People could not order stuff that they wanted. They had to look for new location strategies. They had to look for alternatives to suppliers, closer home, near shoring. And one of the most frequent inquiries that we got in the last 4 years were, how do we find alternative suppliers? So procurement was again tasked to look at resilience as one of the pivoting factors there. Now, underpinning all these, be it ESG, be it innovation, be it resilience, is GenAI. And that's the transforming potential that you will see that permeating and meandering through all these. And now, when you talk about GenAI, there are 3 vectors of value that we see. 1, GenAI can automate tasks. When I say automate tasks, look at any function in an organization. You work with suppliers, you get invoices, purchase orders. Digitalizing those invoices, coding the purchase orders, all this can be automated. That's, use ML, machine language, and automate this. Contract redlining for that matter. But prioritizing tasks is much more than that, because once you automate the invoices, you look at suspicious invoices. For example, the AP and AR folks are always working on, hey, this person has got a limit of $10,000, but he has procured 9 laptops, all of 9,900, suspicious. So such suspicious invoices, duplicate invoices, profligate spending, rubber stamping, because these 9 laptops are rubber stamped and approved and sent, but it costs the company a lot of money. And their transformation technology, software technology, procurement technology can help prioritize actions and say, these need to be validated by someone. It should not go through as automating the task, but validated. So that's the second vector of value. The third vector of value is optimizing decisions. So how can technology look into both automating, prioritizing, but help to kind of optimize decisions? Once there is a supply chain problem, the function should be able to look at the history and what has been the trend, and also be able to say, okay, these parts could be sourced near shore in Eastern Europe here, rather than waiting for these to come from China. So that's kind of optimizing decisions and nudging users to take decisions, perhaps with a human in the loop. So that brings us to, what is the difference between a traditional AI and generative AI? Traditional AI, it gives you incremental gains. But think about generative AI, it gives you substantial gains or mind-blowing gains. And that's what you need to be bothered about. So we saw this book from Zycus, 10x. 10x in what? 10x in just about everything. Productivity, return on your investments, faster time to market, risk mitigation. So 10x across. Think about it. If you are able to do your tasks at 10 times faster, mitigate the risks better, secure, your lives are going to change. And that's the power of Gen AI that you need to keep in mind. Traditional AI depends on more institutional knowledge. Generative AI, it relies on universal knowledge. So it brings in not just what you have within the 4 walls, but much beyond it, the insights that you can get from outside. Today, every time I do an advisory session, they say best practices. And I tell them, why do you want to listen to best practices? Are you going to implement in your company? I just trigger them a bit. And they said, no, we have to learn from the best and apply it. And that's the mandate from the top. That means companies are really thinking, who are we? What are we in this business? And how do we leverage Gen AI to really pivot from where we are? Because in 5 years, transactional procurement is going to be automated. You will no longer see invoices being paid. I call it the 80-20 rule. 20% of the work that anyone does, be it procurement, outside procurement, and 80% of the work. 80% of the work only contributes to 20% of the impact. 20% of the work will contribute to 80% of the impact. So if 80% of what we all do gets automated, that's a very high bar that we are setting. It might take a journey to get in there. Maybe it starts with 40, 50, and then 80. But just imagine in 5 years, if 80% of what you're doing is being automated, then you better shift today. So that's the message. Okay. Which brings us to procurement technology. Now, there are different terminologies. Supplier value management, e-procurement business spend management. This is the source-to-pay cycle that you see. Typically, it starts with spend analytics, where CFOs say, where am I spending the money? Am I making good concrete decisions on sourcing? And that triggers sourcing. It's a cycle. Sourcing of goods, services, they are different. How does sourcing, once you source and identify a supplier, you get a contract signed. And once the contract is signed, you need to manage the contract, the performance of the suppliers. And then the purchasing happens. That's the entire downstream. purchasing of goods, purchasing of services, purchasing of travel and expenses, and how invoice automation, invoices need to be received, invoices need to be paid, which in turn triggers spend analytics. So this is a circle, and today companies are wriggling out of ERPs and other traditional methods they use for their procurement and having a dedicated SVM. It could be supplier value management for source to pay upstream, Procure-to-Pay, it could be an entire suite. You have all flavors available today. And what is important is GenAI is pervasive across all these. So when you look at the key use cases, I have a slide on that. It permeates through sourcing, through spend analytics, sourcing, through contracts, through supplier risk and performance management, and also into the downstream functions. So when you look at GenAI, what you need to be mindful of, it's almost like a river rafting expedition. What do you do in a river rafting expedition? You don't know what is to come, but you want to go and just enjoy and consume what comes on you. But at some point in time, the next time you do this river rafting expedition, you say, oh, lessons learned, I need to buckle up because I could get thrown off. I need to be very careful because there are some rocks hitting me on the side. Maybe I need to keep a helmet with me when I go there. So when you go on a river rafting expedition with GenAI, let your creativity loose, but learn lessons from every rafting expedition that you take. And that's the way you need to approach this. So when we looked at some studies and research that we did, we asked about how far has the organization gone in terms of adopting AI and GenAI. It's a mixed bag. We asked about 5,000 decision makers all over the world. And we see almost about a 20% across early stages to late stages, couple of few use cases, but no value determined, couple of use cases, value determined, a lot many use cases, and deployment of use cases at enterprise scale. It's a mixed bag that we are seeing today. What does this mean? Or what is the takeaway from here is organizations are at different level of maturity. You need to be very clear about your organization. I always put a quadrant and say, take the logo of your organization and put it on this quadrant. The x-axis is, are you a centralized, homogeneous organization? The other extreme of the x-axis is, are you federated, heterogeneous? And the y-axis is, are you mature in terms of your technology maturity? Less mature, beginner, highly mature. If you take your logo and put it in one of these quadrants, that should tell you how you work with your suppliers. How does your organization tick when you adopt new technologies like GenAI? And should you start small? Should you look at internal versus external? Should you look at high impact, low impact, and so on? We did a further analysis about how would you characterize your organization in its planned use of AI and GenAI, and we see that there are about 5 ways of traversing this path. It typically starts with education. You need to know what GenAI is all about and what is it capable of doing. Without having that idea, you cannot get into a river rafting expedition. So you need to be educated. And when I say educated, you need to have a plan for education. Education internally, education external. And we say co-creation is a very good way of educating. What do you mean by that? So enterprises like you, it's very important that you work with suppliers. Suppliers bring in that innovation, but you have an onus in training your suppliers as well. Forget about training yourselves on GenAI. So you train yourself, train your suppliers. Don't leave that to the suppliers. And that's the co-creation, because you're going to get reciprocal benefits from your suppliers when you do that. That's the skin in the game that you do. And most organizations do a very good job of identifying who their strategic suppliers are. It may be impossible to do. I was talking the other day to Mercedes, who said they have 2,500 suppliers. Can you do it with all? 80-20 rule. We use 80-20 rule. for a lot of analogies, which works very fine. The next phase is exploration, where you currently explore, move away from education into how you move into the next stage and say, how do I bring it into my context? That brings us to the experimentation phase. Identify, using the 80-20 rule, those 20% of use cases that you think could catapult and expand. And it could be contracts, it could be invoices, but you're having more of a problem area. You can start with a problem question saying, where is my pain point in my organization? That would be a trigger point for this experimentation, and then brings you into the expansion phase. There are two ways in which we do it in a procurement context: internal versus external. Vendors of procurement solutions typically bring in their AI solution and roll it out at customers, but they could also use it internally, for example, for their leads generation, marketing initiatives, for their HR, and so on. So it's kind of the internal and the external, which you need to kind of decide. They may go in hand, or you need to decide which has more priority than other, but it's entirely fine-tuned to your organization. So Gen AI, is it a chance or is it a change? In our opinion, it's both a chance and a change. This is an opportunity for you just to leave it behind. You cannot ignore this opportunity. It is a change because you're not going to do it in a siloed manner. You need to rally the support of your organization. Now, Gen AI can happen in procurement, it can happen in HCM, it can in HR, finance, legal, talk about any function. And everyone is, the business users, IT, and all the stakeholders in the organizations are going to kind of get attention on Gen AI. So the companies should prioritize, where are we going? And procurement should be part of that prioritization phase, because that's of paramount importance. Productivity is the leading benefit. This is very clear. Almost 50% of the people that we interviewed said that's the benefit that the leaders see from Gen AI. Innovation, cost efficiencies, and others to follow. When you look at Gen AI use cases, there are a plethora of use cases. As I said, it could be in contracts, it could be in spend analytics, invoices, supplier risk, it could be in sourcing, autonomous sourcing, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of use cases. You need to apply what is relevant to your organization. What are those high impact use cases that you see where you think that this will bring in more these substantial benefits that you see. One good way is to identify low-hanging fruits, because it's a new technology, and you don't have to really go back to the boardroom every time your strategy gets wrong, or the way you traversed was not well thought through. So a good best practice is to start with low-hanging fruits and get those quick wins, but have that big picture to catapult into higher investments and move it from where you are. So very important is how quickly can you get return on investments from Gen AI. And most people think, because there's been a lot of hype created very quickly, 10x is fine, but look at what people say. It typically takes between 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years to see those benefits come in. So prepare yourself for the long haul as you make the small incremental steps today. Be mindful of the pitfalls that you need to avoid, but the advantages that you get, the benefits that you're going to reap are much more than that. Legislations will play a very crucial role. We see the AI Act coming in. We see hallucinations coming in. You need to pay attention to that. So if I were to kind of summarize what I basically said, you need your suppliers, claw a good working relationships with your suppliers, with your A team, have your strategic partner assessment done. Work with them on Gen AI rather than without them. Stay on course. There will be a lot of tailwinds for you in terms of legislations coming in. Don't sit and allow the legislations to come, act even before they come, and work on them. Thirdly, it's not the time to sit and stare and look at what is happening. Let me not get into the same situation because that company had a lot of problems, but rather venture it. Get onto the river rafting expedition, because if you don't start, you'll never learn what the pitfalls are, and you'll never learn from your mistakes. So make that start. It's very important. Get your top management attention. As I said, you need to also skill your people, okay? You need to have a strategy to skill. Co-creation is the way to go. So success will take time. Don't look for short-term measures. It's not an overnight journey. You need to be prepared to kind of go back to the boarding room and adjust your strategy if it may. But listen carefully to your ecosystems, because bulk of your learnings, bulk of the ideas and what you can tangibly do comes from your ecosystems. So, and then what we call as let 1,000 flowers bloom and don't stop where you are. So which brings us to the final part of my presentation. The question is, it's neither an if or a when, but it's how quickly you can get onto the GenAI bandwagon. Thank you so much for your attention. And I should say my last word that I know in Spanish, gracias.
Thank you very much for this, insights, I would say in past, current, future potential, and, also advice, what to do and what to expect. I think that's really about how we need to think about GenAI. Thank you very much, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Okay.
Once more.
Thank you so much.
And this is the safe way down.